right, so now we're officially started. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to see so many of you interested in exploring new ways to manage human waste in the backcountry. My name is Joelle Marier. I am the Executive Director of the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. I'll introduce our presenter in a moment, but before we jump into today's topic, I'll share just a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is scheduled for 1 hour. We'll keep some time at the end for questions. If you do come up with questions during the presentation, please place them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible during the Q&A. If there is lively discussion, we've got about 15 minutes of additional time after the top of the hour for any extra time we want to spend talking about questions or if we're in a really deep discussion. Out of respect for our presenter and other participants, please mute your microphone throughout the webinar unless you've been asked to share your question. So with this, let's just get started. Today, I am happy to welcome Jake Thomas. Jake is the co-founder of PACT Outdoors. PACT Outdoors is a Colorado-based company that designs products that make it easier and more sustainable for people to do their business in the outdoors. I'll post a link to their website in the chat as soon as Jake jumps on. Jake is here to tell us a bit about the products PACT produces, but mostly wants to share some results from a wag bag kiosk and disposal station project that PACT initiated in partnership with Leave No Trace, Penn State University, and the Colorado 14ers Initiative in some high-use areas of Colorado. So thanks so much for joining us today, Jake, and I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Joelle. I'm just going to share my presentation here real quick, and we'll get started. Awesome. So grateful for everyone's time. I know we're all really ramping up right now, and it's like becoming busier and busier. This is the part of the job that honestly I love. Yeah, we are a for-profit business, and so we have to spend a lot of time selling and marketing our products and doing all those types of things. But really, what my partner and I are passionate about is solving the poop problem of reducing the resource burden, both financially and human-powered wise, of mishandled human waste. And the primary way that we're focused on doing that is by supporting users, people who venture into the outdoors, whether they're really experienced or this is their first time, supporting them with not only better tools, but also designing solutions. And I'll kind of talk about what that looks like in practice here in a little bit. But let's just jump into it. Let's see here. Just need my slide to move forward. Okay, so quick little agenda on what we're going to be talking about today. First, I'll run through the poop problem, but I imagine everybody on this call is intimately familiar with it in their respective disciplines. But I'll talk about some of the implications, how we talk to policymakers about it, and how we're kind of approaching it and thinking about it. I'll go into a little bit on who we are, the solutions or products that we've made, and really kind of try to talk about how we're really honing in on the challenges that the individual outdoor enthusiast has with outdoor bathroom practice and some research we've done around that. I'm actually going to present two case studies from pilot programs that we've run here in the state of Colorado. Both very different solutions that I think may have some value depending on whether you're a trail organization or a land manager or what have you, and then some takeaways throughout. So this first section I'm going to rip through because everybody understands this intimately. Participation in outdoor recreation is still at record numbers, and that's super, super exciting, but it also poses a number of different challenges to us as we look to sort of manage both our public lands and the traffic that comes there. What we all find and know personally is that everybody poops, even in the outdoors. And what some of our research that I'm going to get into has been showing is that a lot of that poop, a surprising amount of it, is happening outside the reach of trailhead bathroom facilities. And I think that's going to be one of the most interesting takeaways that I'll share from the 14er study that we did with Penn State and Leave No Trace, was just where people are going to the bathroom and when it happens on their hike or on their adventure. So more to come on that. Poop has been creating a number of challenges for land managers for a number of years now. My partner and I joke that we never really wanted to start a business around poop. We had an idea, recognized an opportunity for better solutions, and honestly had a good laugh at it. And we're like, yeah, but why would we want to do this? And in the years that followed, it became really hard to ignore the media coverage, the newsletters and information that were coming out from trail orgs about the impacts of mishandled human waste. So waste that's not packed out or buried appropriately. And I think we all know these, but data has shown that it impacts our waterways. We're based as context in the Gunnison Valley, so Crested Butte in Gunnison, Colorado. We receive an enormous influx of outdoor enthusiasts between those peak summer months. And it has a huge, huge impact on the health of our ecosystems. And chief among those is waterway contamination. We have numerous lakes and rivers at or above 10,000 feet that have elevated levels of E. coli. And that has been connected to a high volume of outdoor recreation in close proximity to those waterways. So that's a big one. Wildlife health and safety, public health are also factors. But we know from research from the U.S. Forest Service that it also impacts the visitor experience, right? So mishandled human waste actually has a more negative impact on perceived enjoyment of experience than overcrowding does. And so there's all these little facets to the problem that impact different people and different entities in different ways. And that's what I think we're one of the things we're working to do is get better at how we talk about that and how we kind of focus our messaging around those impacts. So the big one that I think users experience and people who are enthusiastic about going outdoors is an increase in regulations. So I can talk about what this looks like in our valley. For example, a couple years ago, we converted almost all of our dispersed camping into fee-based camping. And that was a direct result of overuse or the impacts of overuse, particularly trash and human waste. Another famous or sort of well-known example in Colorado is our Four Pass Loop in the Maroon Bells Wilderness. It might be the most popular backpacking loop in Colorado and has recently been converted into a permitted base loop. Now, we support land managers all day in these decisions. They think about them carefully and don't make them lightly. Our stance is that human waste or mishandled human waste should never be a reason that we have to implement new regulations. Instead, we need to be finding people or finding ways to give people better solutions and help them to be more prepared. And what I should say is this is complex, right? Like on one hand, increasing regulations can make accessing places like the Four Pass Loop shown here more difficult for novice entrants to figure out and navigate that system and secure what is a highly coveted permit. But if you talk to folks in White River National Forest, which we work closely with, they'll tell you that this has had a lot of benefits for them. Permitting allows them access to additional funds via those permits that they can have and deploy to maintaining and preserving the trail and the integrity of the public lands there. Rec.gov also gives them an additional point of communication so that when people book a permit, they can follow up and deliver really critical messaging about how people need to be prepared to recreate responsibly in that environment. And so this isn't black or white. There's a lot of things on either side to kind of to consider. But our stance is pretty clear that we feel like people need better tools for managing their waste. So I'm going to switch a little bit now to the individual kind of user level out of this kind of high level macro space. When we started this business, we were kind of like, why is poop such a problem? What's going wrong for people or what's not present for people that they need? And the first thing that we saw as entrepreneurs that we've kind of been trained to look for is what's called a home hack. If you were burying your waste, your standard kit was something like a Ziploc bag, a trowel, a half-used roll of TP, maybe some sanitizer. You cobbled together items from home and assembled your kit. And if you're experienced in the outdoors, you grew up doing this works just fine for you. That's great. Keep doing it. But for a lot of folks, the fact that there isn't a dedicated piece of gear makes it less mentally salient that this is something that they're going to think about when they're packing their backpack or their day pack or whatever it may be. We have kits for everything we do in the outdoors, from cooking to first aid, and kits ultimately make it easier to be prepared. So why, if going to the bathroom is something we generally do every day, do we not have that equivalent for, in this case, burying your waste? And so that kind of set us down this path of what opportunity is there to address those user needs. When we were just getting started, we were a part of an accelerator program with Moose Jaw Mountaineering, the former outdoor retailer. And they were kind enough to give us access to their email database. And so we took full advantage to ask their email subscribers all about their backcountry poop behaviors. And what came out from that was really, really fascinating. The first thing we found was that 72% of folks, almost three out of four, have had a time when they're in the outdoors, had to poop, and didn't have the tools necessary to do that properly. It's an indication that in many ways we've all been there, and that this is a learning curve that everybody who goes outdoors is on. And because it's a taboo topic, it can be an extended learning curve where you're not getting the education that you maybe get in other areas as quickly as you might. The second thing that came up when we asked people about what some of the greatest challenges were with going outdoors, it was feeling clean, having the right tools, and finding privacy essentially to do it. So tools came up as a big one. And then when we ask like what were the things that would ideally be present in a bathroom kit for you? Again, it would be feeling clean, it would be grab and go, it would be environmentally friendly, and ultimately kind of lightweight. And so that gave us some good guidance on what might be missing from some of these products. But ultimately, you hear cleanliness coming up over and over again as something that users are really, really keyed in on and really need. Cool. So this is a quote from Dave Ox, the executive director of SIMBA, Crested Butte Mountain Bike Association, which does a lot of the trail work here in our valley. People don't poop on the ground and leave it because they're bad. They do it because they are naive and unprepared. And I think the closer we get to this problem, the easier it is to kind of assume malicious intent. But the reality is, when you talk to people, they haven't been educated on this. They weren't lucky enough to grow up having these practices instilled by a parent or family member or friend. And as a result, they find themselves being unprepared. And this is sort of what our whole philosophy and thinking is built around, is that assume people are good and look for ways to support them better. So how do we do that? 5 years ago, when we kicked this off, we started making all-in-one bathroom kits with the idea of making them for every kind of activity. So we started out with this really large kind of car camping based kit. And we've over time kind of trimmed it down and made it smaller and lighter to a point where recently we launched something called our ultralight kit, which is really designed for like trail runners and bike packers and mountain bikers and people that are super weight and space constrained. We wanted to make it an easy yes for them to justify carrying a bathroom kit with them, primarily a shovel, so that they can dig a proper cat hole, as trail runners are one of those groups of people, for example, that are really inclined to use their shoe or a rock or a stick and not likely to get 6 to 8 inches down. So when we think about our products, we're thinking about activity segments, right? If I'm a climber, I'm I'm in Rocky Mountain National Park. I'm hiking in 6 miles. It feels really remote. I'm still going to the same place that everybody else who climbs is going as well. I need to pack out my waste. So we think about activities, but we also think about environments and how those needs and requirements differ for both the location and the user. And that's sort of what we're building from. So I'll just talk about a couple products because I think it'll give helpful context for the case studies that come after. This is our PACT Light Kit. It's a baton basically. So you have this aluminum tubular trowel, and inside the cavity of the trowel, we store PACT wipes and tabs, and I can explain what those are and what they do in just a couple slides. The whole kit comes together. It weighs 4 ounces when it's stocked with a week's worth of supplies. So the idea is you're going on a long backpacking trip. You throw this in your backpack, and it has everything you need to bury your waste sustainably. And so we make it all integrated. We make it slick, just like every other piece of outdoor gear that's out there. This makes it enticing to people, more likely that they want to buy it and use it. And it's a great solution whether you're going out on a day hike or backpacking or anything in between. So that's an example of one of our burial solutions. The DNA for our kits are what kind of is a little outside the norm of what you might normally see. So toilet paper and wet wipes are manufactured in ways that use a tremendous amount of chemicals. And that as a result of that, they decompose in the outdoors or in a landfill. It doesn't really matter, really, really slowly. And so we started by saying, well, toilet paper gets wet, it gets crushed. Wet wipes have plastic and all kinds of antimicrobial treatments to keep them from molding in the packaging. Can we make something that's really designed for outdoor enthusiasts? And that's the dehydrated compressed PACT wipe that you see there. It's a small puck. You put a tiny amount of water on it, and it unfolds into what is a wet wipe that is made wet just with the water from your own water bottle. So it addresses that cleanliness piece that I shared kind of earlier in the survey data. It's smaller and lighter. But the thing that we're actually really proud about is we have what's called an Okotex certification on this. It means it's free of literally 1,000 chemicals that are commonly used in the manufacturing of textiles. Chief among those is the 30 or so varieties of PFAS, forever chemicals, which are in most major brands of toilet paper, and we flush them into our water streams. So the way we think about things is make something that's better for the user in the outdoors, but oh yeah, give it properties that make it more sustainable with less chemicals, faster decomposition rates, and things like that. So our bathroom kits come with these packed wipes. The second piece, which we kind of joke is our 500 million year old technology, are called PACT tabs. These are small wooden plugs that are inoculated with fungal mycelium. Mycelium is the root system for fungus. It branches out underground, doing the work of decomposing dead material and converting it into bioavailable nutrients for other microorganisms in the soil. It's under every square inch of viable soil on Earth. The species we use in PACT tabs grows natively across North America and on every continent, actually, in the world. It is non-aggressive. So what you do is you add it to the cat hole, 3 PACT tabs to the cat hole with your poop, fill with dirt. The mycelium wakes up, it decomposes the waste faster, but perhaps of most importance, it's extremely effective at killing coliform bacteria like E. coli that can get into waterways or persist in the soil. So it's an insurance policy, if you will, when you're burying your waste to add PACT tabs to the cat hole to support the decomposition process. And we're kind of taking this mycelium based solution in a lot of different directions that are really, really exciting. So we borrowed this from a field called mycoremediation, myco meaning fungi, remediation meaning to clean up or decontaminate. And so what we'll be releasing, it seems like later this year, is a mycelium-based compost toilet additive that you could put in an in-vehicle or an in-home compost toilet. And what that does incredibly effectively is it breaks down that bacteria. And with breaking down that bacteria, reduces waste harmful odors and things like that. And really what it does is it makes the disposal of human waste in compost toilets a safe practice, both for the user as well as for the environment itself. So we're kind of taking this and steadily expanding it beyond the individual, the single person and the single poop in a cat hole, and expanding it into larger applications. The second, which we have some photos kind of in the second row there, is mycofiltration. So it's using the same kind of mycelium approach, but through a filter to help filter contaminated water. And you can kind of see the difference there between the control and one of our mycelium variables. Again, extremely effective at killing bacteria like E. coli in a really short amount of time. So we're kind of steadily branching into this waterless sanitation realm and looking for partners for research with that. We do most of our research in this realm with Colorado Mountain College. We try to find academic partners to work with us on this whenever possible. And we'll have a bunch of really interesting papers coming out later this year or early next on all of this work we've been doing in this realm. But if you want more information on it, happy to provide it and chat more afterwards. Packing out your poop is important in sensitive ecosystems, as well as ultra high use areas. And so we came out with a pack out kit, also known as a wag bag, last year. And there's a lot to talk about here. This is kind of where one of our research studies that I'm about to get into is going to gravitate towards. But we have been working for a long time on a bioplastic based wag bag. We've often looked at wag bags as more of a trade-off than a solution. We're removing poop from a place that we deem to be valuable and putting it in a place that we don't. But in doing so, in encasing it in plastic, we're massively slowing the decomposition time. So our ultimate goal is to create a wag bag that is both shelf stable and safe for handling, but ultimately breaks down a lot faster in the landfills. But what we wanted to start with before we made that investment was just something that made incremental improvements to make the wag bag more approachable and more user friendly. So we give it bright, vibrant packaging to make it recognizable. We print these huge, bold, easy to follow instructions on the outer bag. We communicate why packing out is so important for our public lands. Leave no trace research shows that if you tell people why to do something, they're a lot more likely to comply with it. The back side of the outer pack out bag has something called the Daily Dump. It's like a mocked up newspaper that's got a comic and a poop bingo game on it. So we're trying to do these things to make this into a consumer product like any other that is, dare I say, desirable, because we think it's really important for changing the norms and driving adoption of this practice. And then we did other things like we included packed wipes because limited toilet paper was an issue that people have. We were working with a number of land management partners to provide them with WAG bags. We work with the Colorado BLM office, a number of U.S. Forest Service district offices. We're collaborating with Rocky Mountain National Park currently on their waste management strategy and plan. And as a part of that, we lower our prices to help land managers and trail organizations and tourism organizations stretch their dollars further in the cases that they're going to be giving these out to users via kiosks or trail ambassador programs or things like that. So, I just talked a lot about products, but really a couple years ago, what got us on this path with research was this realization that it's good for our business if somebody buys one of our poop kits at REI. It keeps the lights on. We are a very small company. I'm not going to pull any punches about that. And so it really matters when someone wants to go and spend their dollars on our product. But what we realize is that customer at REI probably isn't the individual who needs the most help. The person who's maybe the most naive about this is far more difficult to reach through the traditional communication channels. They're not likely following as many brands on social media and plugged into newsletters and all the traditional communication channels that we all utilize. And so we started thinking about how do we kind of make this move from just thinking about products as kind of the end all be all to solution sets, of which products and tools are a part of. And that was kind of the beginning of some of these pilot programs and research studies that we've been running for the last couple of years. And so we'll segue a little bit to get into that. So, a kind of a high level anatomy of how we think about these stewardship strategies. It's really three pieces when we're looking at these programs is like tools. And are they tools that make compliance first and foremost easier and more convenient? Second is communication. Is it simple, consistent, and compelling? I think we all know that the communication at trailheads varies widely, both in terms of what it says, but also how it looks and how it's presented. As a business, we are taught over and over again that people need to be delivered the same message in the same way over and over again before it really starts to set in. And so we're really interested in how to implement communication strategies that, on a statewide level, for example, are a lot more consistent for users. And I can kind of talk about how that's maybe going to be coming to life in some fashion in Colorado. And then the third is delivery infrastructure. Are we presenting the tools and the information at the right place and the right time to drive the biggest shift in behavior? Cool. So the first case study I'm going to walk you through is called our Do Colorado Right program. This was a grant-funded program from the Colorado Tourism Office. It was a partnership with our Valley, Gunnison Crested Butte Tourism, and the state of Colorado. And basically, what this involved was distributing our packed light kit, so burial-based bathroom kits, at key points of outdoor access all over the state. So what we took our kit, we stripped down the packaging, we attached this super comprehensive how-to info card to it, and made it something that a trail ambassador, for example, could hand to a user, and they would have everything they need, both supplies and information, to follow leave no trace best practices in the wilderness, whether they're out on a hike or some other kind of outdoor excursion. So what we're really, really proud about with this program was the network of partners that we developed in the process. So we partnered with Colorado State Parks, U.S. Forest Service district offices, trail organizations, both national like the CDTC, as well as state-based like the Colorado Trail Foundation. We partnered with tourism entities or DMOs, destination management organizations, which is like Visit Aspen, Visit Steamboat, Gunnison Crested Butte. We partnered with the 10 state-run visitor centers throughout Colorado, as well as locally run visitor centers, which are key points of access in a lot of our gateway communities. And yeah, I think that covers it. So this is not a complete list, unfortunately, of all the partners we had, but it gives you an idea of who was involved in this project. And so what's really special about it is PACT was able to kind of serve as the logistical glue. We have the product, we developed the communications, we managed all the kind of outreach and distribution to all these partners. But what we leverage is the very hyper local knowledge and sort of resources of each of these different partners. So, what was cool about the program was all the partners deployed the kits in different ways. So, Go Breck, which is the tourism arm for Breckenridge, distributed their packed light kits on the shuttle up to Mount Quandary. Mount Quandary is one of our most highly trafficked 14,000 foot peaks. They saw they had a captive audience in these shuttles, and they used that as a place to distribute both the kits and information. Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we worked with Golden Gate Canyon State Park, which is on our front range, kind of in that Denver corridor area, and they distributed them at their backcountry permitting office for people who are heading out on overnights. The third example there is with the San Juan Mountain Association. They have this very robust forest ambassador program and do a lot of tabling at their high use trailheads throughout the summer months. And so they had forest ambassadors there to distribute the kits and provide information. So this cohesive branding underneath the kind of Do Colorado Right moniker, but again, hyper local in how we deployed these resources to various entities and organizations. One of the things PACT was able to bring to it was this whole media component. One thing is that the media really likes to talk about poop, and so do people. If you crack the door for them, they'll happily take you up on the opportunity. So the program got a tremendous state and nationwide media coverage for a span of about 2 years. This grant program ran for 2 years and ended last year. And we feel like we were able to kind of keep poop and the need to be prepared top of mind through a lot of media channels, both within our state and beyond. Okay, so there was one key takeaway. In year one, we put out surveys to all the volunteers that you see with like the forest ambassador programs and the volunteers at visitor centers. And those folks are kind of on the front lines having conversations with users. And they said the same kind of thing over and over and over again. It's really hard to talk to people about whether they're prepared to poop in the woods. No matter how tactful you are, it feels awkward and intrusive and preachy. But when you give someone a tool or a solution, it completely shifts that conversation to a positive. Suddenly, individuals feel empowered and they feel supported, and they're a lot more excited to engage on topics about Leave No Trace as a result. And so the people who are out there doing this work were like, this was so helpful for making my job easier, but also more effective. And that was a really exciting insight for us about the role that tools can play in helping to facilitate effective conversations with people heading into the outdoors. And the photos you see there are just a few of the collections of shots of people distributing kits at various locations. So we worked with our office, and where I am now is at Western Colorado University's campus in Gunnison. And at that university, they have an outdoor industry MBA program. So it's a graduate program for folks that want to learn about the business side of the outdoor industry. So we worked with them as a part of a program called the Right Collegiate Challenge to develop a survey for year two of our program. And it was delivered via this little QR code sticker that went on the outside of the light kits that we distributed, and people could scan it and they could run through this quick Google form and get us some data about about their experience and about their practices and what they're observing in the outdoors. And so this is an example of us doing research that is not necessarily publishable. It doesn't have that level of rigor, but rather what it's designed to do is give us sort of directional ideas and produce insights that may be worth investigating further. So the poop problem is real. About 3 out of 4 people said they sometimes, usually, or always encounter human waste or discarded TP in Colorado's outdoors. And a similar percentage of people say the problem is either the same or getting worse in the last 3 years. And we used 3 years when this survey was issued as like a post-COVID timeframe. So it's real. People who head outdoors experience it and see it. And it has an impact on their experience. So 69% said seeing poop or discarded toilet paper makes them somewhat or significantly less likely to return to an area. And this is concurrent with some other research that has been done in this space. The second data point on the right there doesn't come from us. It actually comes from the Colorado Tourism Office. 82% of our state's overnight visitation are repeat visitors. They're people who come back year after year for that camping trip or that fly fishing trip. And our tourism economy depends on people coming back year after year. And a big part of that is maintaining the beauty of our public lands and the quality so that they don't have a negative experience and say, hey, I may just think about another place next year. We may want to try something new. And so thinking about our tourism product isn't something that we at PACT were really keyed in on years ago when we started down this road. We were a lot more focused on waterway quality and wildlife health and all of these environmental factors, frankly. But when we're talking with policymakers and people like that, when we take this economic stance, it seems to have a greater impact and draw more interest. And I think we're seeing that in the outdoor industry as a whole, where there's a shift to more sort of economic related messaging and impacts and effects. But we definitely are seeing it play out as we start to kind of think about and work with policymakers on this challenge. Tools don't change one behavior, they change future behavior. So 87% said that their interaction when they received this kit improved their understanding of leave no trace principles. So that conversation opened up a conversation about leave no trace and what they need to be prepared. And over 9 out of 10 said they're more likely to carry a bathroom kit with them on future trips as a result of this exchange. And so there's a high touch, high investment in that initial exchange with that person when you're giving them a kit. But what we're seeing is that it's going to change behavior theoretically as we move into the future. And that's where we start to see potential to start gaining ground with helping users to adopt better practices. And it really fits with this idea of like people want to do the right thing. It doesn't feel good to not be prepared in the outdoors and have to go to the bathroom. You want those tools. Having the right tool for a problem and being able to deploy it feels really good. That's agency. And so I think it applies here, and the data seems to bear that out. So there's a lot of sort of takeaways here, and I won't go through all of them. But I think the big thing from this program is the critique that I would give to it. It is not the most scalable thing. We would give out around 6,000 or so kits throughout the state per year. And that's not insignificant, but a bathroom kit has a lot of supplies in it. It carries a higher cost than other tactics might. And so when we came away from this program, we were like, we know tools are really important. We know having a hyper local approach that gives trail organizations and land managers the agency to kind of deploy and use these things, given their unique circumstances, is a really key model. But how do we look at this in a way that might be more scalable for less investment? So that's kind of the pivot that I'll give you before we go into this next case study. Cool. So we affectionately call this program that I'm going to talk about the Clean 14. And this was really a pilot program and research study to explore pack out behavior on Colorado's 14,000 foot peaks. And PACT initiated this and funded this work, but the actual work was done by researchers at Penn State University with guidance from Leave No Trace and the Colorado 14ers Initiative, which is the trail organization, the one trail organization in our state that is responsible for all of the 14,000 foot peaks. If you talk to folks at CFI, they'll tell you there is no 14er in Colorado where human waste isn't an issue. And when we think about this, it kind of makes sense, right? There's kind of two factors playing into this. One, our 14ers receive, or our popular 14ers, I should say, receive tens of thousands of hikers in a span of about 8 weeks in the summertime. So it's ultra high use, concentrated in this narrow window of time. The second piece is that 14,000 foot peaks are alpine environments by nature, and they require a different set of practices, in this case, packing out. So you don't, especially above tree line, have this really nice soil base that you can dig and bury your waste. And as a result, a lot of people find themselves unprepared for what the environment that they're heading into necessitates from a bathroom practice standpoint. So, we put in place a wag bag distribution kiosk, but also a trash can. So you can kind of see the top part there was a place to grab a wag bag. The bottom part of it was to dispose of it. And we put it at the base or the trailhead of Mount Elbert, which is Colorado's highest 14,000 foot peak. And we chose Mount Elbert because it is not usually the first 14er that you hike, but it's usually maybe like the sixth one you do. So we thought it would give us this nice balance of users who are not totally new to this practice, but also haven't hiked 30 or 40 or 50 14ers. And we installed this kiosk just past the trailhead. And what we wanted to do was see what actual user behavior looked like, who is taking a wag bag, who's disposing of a wag bag, or maybe leaving it on a trail somewhere. And so we have actual user behavior data married with a survey that was run by researchers from Penn State University for people who are coming back down the trail after their hike. So, four things that we kind of wanted to learn about was really get an understanding of attitudes and beliefs around packing out your poop. Where are people at? What do they think? What do they know about this? What factors persuade them to hike out? What type of communication and messaging and infrastructure? How does that impact either support or not support better compliance with recommended practices? So the idea was to kind of get an understanding of like perceptions and attitudes, but actual behavior with the installation of this kiosk. And I guess before I kind of move on to some more of the details, this is one thing that this is why partnering with academia is really important. We were excited to make this really beautiful looking kiosk that would maximize desired behavior, right? We wanted to give people the information about how to do this and why it's so important and all of that. And Penn State came in and said, nope, we want to provide people with wag bags, but not persuade or influence this research in any way. So you can kind of see it's a very nondescript kiosk. It's not particularly enticing. It simply states these are human waste pack out bags. You can take one and dispose of it in the trash can when you're done. But that's about it. We don't give any information about how to do this practice or why it's important. So again, I said we did this at Mount Elbert in the San Isabel National Forest. We used a qualitative survey instrument. Our researchers from Penn State were at the trailhead for 19 days, both spanning July and August, the high season for 14ers, and we used a number of statistical methods for analyzing the data. So what I'm going to give you now is just some high level sort of insights that have come out of it, and there'll certainly be a lot more in the coming months. We had 410 respondents in the survey, almost an 80% response rate. When you're surveying people about poop, if a lot of them are maybe not wanting to take the survey and declining, we get a little worried that we may not have a statistically significant or relevant representative sample. But when 8 out of 10 people are saying yes to the survey, it gives us a lot of confidence that the data we're getting is representative of the larger audience of in this case, 14er hikers. So Mount Elbert sees about 15,000 hikers per year. Based on our surveys, we found that 60% were non-residents, which was even higher than we expected, but it just goes to show how much of hiking 14ers is a tourism draw in our state. 69% have visited other 14ers in the past, so unlikely to be their first hike. And that mean number of 14ers that they've hiked is 5. And that kind of captured that goal of sort of not making it the first time you've done a hike like this, but also not getting that group of really experienced, sort of more hardcore people as well. So where shit happens, 1,650 people pooped on Mount Elbert in 2024. That was 11% of total hikers. And that 1,650 is an extrapolation of the data that we got from the surveys. So that is an estimate, but 11%. And what was even more interesting about that was that 30% of people of those 1,650 were using the vault toilet at the trailhead. The other 70% pooped somewhere on the mountain. And when we think about this logically, it kind of makes sense. If you're hiking a 14er, you might be starting at 3 in the morning. You're certainly at higher elevation. You're eating food at different times than you normally do. It kind of takes some time for your bowels to get going. But what we find is that the vast majority of hikers in this instance are having to go to the bathroom outside the reach of bathroom facilities. And it suggests to us that while bathrooms are absolutely essential at trailheads when we have the financial and manpower to kind of support their ongoing maintenance and upkeep, it suggests to us that other strategies could potentially be useful for when people are outside the reach of those facilities. So attitudes around wag bags. This was really, really pleasantly surprising for us. 3 out of 4 people have heard of wag bags, but only a little over a third of folks have ever used them in the past. A very small percentage of people that we surveyed said, no, I would never pack out my poop. I could not even think about doing that. So these questions, along with a battery of others that I'm not showing here, gave us a lot of confidence that people are actually really receptive to this practice. They just haven't tried it before. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of part of the challenge, at least with this particular audience of 14er hikers, is one of trial and kind of understanding. It's getting more familiar with this new kind of tool. What happened with actual use? Almost 30% of hikers took a wag bag, and 30% of all the people that we surveyed who pooped at Mount Elbert packed out their poop using a wag bag. One person in that entire collection of survey respondents came equipped to the trailhead with their own wag bag. Everybody else used one of the free products provided at the kiosk. 79% that said trying a wag bag makes them more likely to bring one in the future. So this kind of fits with that thing we talked about earlier where um, giving someone a tool doesn't change just one behavior. It has the power to impact future behavior and future practices because you've shown someone a new way of doing things. So this was really encouraging when we look at the fact that 30% of people use the vault toilet, another 30% packed out their poop using a wag bag, and then a little under 40% buried their waste. And we broke that out between people who buried their waste and their toilet paper and people who buried their waste and packed out their teepee. But instantly, when we put this pretty nondescript kiosk into place, we had this nice mix of practices from using the vault, packing out your poop, and burying it. It was right in there with the other methods in terms of the percentage of people that were using it, which was really encouraging. And that was using a kiosk that wasn't really delivering a lot of information about, why the practice was so important or how to do it. So there's a bunch of takeaways here, and I'm not going to go through them all. What I'd rather kind of talk about is sort of where we're interested in going with this research. So, a 14er is a specific type of person. That's a specific context and user. We're really interested in understanding different contexts and specifically ones that maybe have a less educated, less experienced user. So it could be somebody recreating in a national park or using hiking trails that maybe just sort of aren't extreme as hiking to 14,000 feet, and how some of this data might change with that, both familiarity with wag bags, likelihood to have used them in the past, and interest in using them in the future. Some of that is very interesting. So changing our location and context, we think, is an important thing to continue studying here. The second piece is how to sort of maximize communications to get the desired behavior, which is packing out your poop, right? And so we used a pretty nondescript kiosk there. We'd be interested in what are the ways to communicate with people that drive the greatest adoption and the greatest compliance with L&T. And so in the coming summers, we're going to be looking for partners and locations to kind of do some of that research with, to expand upon this as we move forward. We see these as a scalable strategy. Certainly, if bathrooms are unavailable or closed, which is something that's going to be happening in our valley here in Colorado, distributing kits and solutions to people could be a viable strategy in lieu of that. And so that's another reason that we want to continue to explore it in more detail. But I think ultimately one of the questions we're kind of curious about is, can we save land managers money? We know from a lot of conversations and working with these folks that pumping vault toilets, especially in remote areas, and keeping them clean is extremely costly. It's not a one-time cost to build a toilet and like you get to set it and forget it. It's far from it. And so it's a high budget line item. And so we're wondering if strategies that put users more in a position of empowerment and responsibility is really a complementary approach to the regulations that we are also putting in place to control overcrowding and use. And whether using these two types of approaches in tandem can really deliver the best results. And so I think one of the things we're interested in doing in the next year is working with land managers more closely to understand how these types of things might help to offset costs. Maybe not in year one, but over time as users develop competency with new practices and are therefore more likely to be prepared when they show up at the trailhead. So anyone who's interested in talking about that or working on it, we're all ears. We're always looking for these types of partnerships with which to continue our own research. So hopefully I didn't go too long. My name is Jake Thomas again. You can reach me at jake@packedoutdoors.com. I so appreciate everyone's time. I know how valuable it is. This is like my favorite part of the job is getting to try and solve these complex problems with really smart, passionate people. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much, Jake. That was awesome. And I always appreciate some good puns, of which there were many. So thank you for that.
Probably unintentional, I would imagine.
We've got about 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes left for any questions that folks have. So I'd like to open it up for folks to share those. If you do have a question, I see David Johnson just popped something in the chat. Who was responsible for removing the used bags from the kiosk and what did they do with them? What is the long-term sustainable approach to that disposal? And then if other folks have questions, just pop it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll get around to you.
Yeah, David, I love this question. A couple things to say about it. Logistically speaking, both PACT and Penn State kind of teamed up to dispose of those kiosks. That was a way that we wanted to support the Forest Service and not create extra work for them during the busy season. And so disposal of these took place at a landfill. We took them to the landfill, notified the people at the landfill of what we were disposing of. There's a slight fee that came with it in our particular area, at least. I don't know if that's the case everywhere. So we handle disposal ourselves. We also found that people were really responsible with either packing them out themselves. The trash cans didn't get nearly as full as we thought they were going to be, which says to us that a lot of folks actually took them out, maybe didn't see the kiosk on their way back down the trail because it's kind of brown and blended in, and ended up driving them out themselves. But to go along with that, like leaving used wag bags on the trail was a huge concern going in. We thought that this might like actually create problems where they didn't exist before. And amazingly, it was not an issue. So we were surveying the trail regularly to look for these, and there were very few left behind. So the sustainable approach to their disposal in our minds, if we're thinking big picture, is really about switching to a bioplastic based material. And that's something that PACT is working on. But ultimately, we need a certain economies of scale to be able to make that transition. People don't want to pay a lot for a bag that they're going to poop in and throw away right away. So cost needs to be sort of kept to a minimum. But that's our ultimate goal and how we make this practice, I would say, more realistic at scale. Hopefully that kind of answers some of your question.
Okay, next question. What is the shelf life of the packed mycelium tabs and pre-used wipes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we say as a rule of thumb, they're best if used within a year, but as long as they're stored in a cool, dry place, they will last longer than that. Their effectiveness does start to decline after about a year. The biggest thing that would impact their effectiveness is prolonged exposure to actually high heat. So temperatures above 100 degrees, like if you left them in a hot car for a week, they would become less effective, not ineffective, but just slightly less viable. We ship them in resealable pouches so that you can kind of keep them dry and so they don't get wet. But a good rule of thumb is about a year till they start kind of declining in effectiveness. And then I'm seeing that question on mycelium performance in high and cold environments. Yeah, so we only recommend using pack tabs in areas where we would say that are approved for the burial of waste. So we would not use them in an alpine environment, for example, because there's not enough of a soil base and microbial activity to support them doing their job and their work. So if it's a place where you're should be packing out now, arid deserts, alpine, you can't get 200 feet from waterways, or even ultra high use areas, we'd say continue to pack out in those places. What we found more specifically with the data, like if you go to a place with really warm, wet soil like the southeastern United States, decomposition of poop took place in about 6 weeks on average. If you came and used them in a place like Colorado that was accessible for burying, so a little higher up, drier, that increases to around 12 weeks. Obviously, the two biggest factors about the speed and effectiveness of mycelium are temperature and moisture. And so the more you have of those, the faster it works.
I think we maybe missed one question, Jake. Isabel
Okay.
asked, did visitors have many questions about how to use the bags themselves, such as what to do if you miss?
Yeah, that's really good. You know, we didn't get a lot of we had a pretty extensive survey that we gave to folks and we had some commentary about how to use wag bags and some particulars. Do you pee in it is another one that we hear sometimes. We try to print, so happy to send samples to anybody that wants to see the product. But we did a lot of surveying when we were developing this and tried to address the most frequently asked questions in the instructions and then in these sort of pro tips that we give on the packaging as well. And we give some information about how to hold it and use it. You know, you can squat and hold it up close to your butt, or you can lay it out on the ground. So we try to be really descriptive. People aren't generally good at reading instructions, but what we have found is when you give someone a wag bag, they will read the instructions carefully on it. And so we look at it as really prime real estate to deliver really important information. So our hope is that the product is doing a little bit of that work for us.
You want me
Yeah.
to relay? You got it.
No, I got it. Yep. I'm just making sure I didn't miss them. So yeah,
Awesome.
very dry. I see the question about mycelium with the very dry conditions. Yeah, arid deserts. In some cases, I think it could work okay. It really sort of depends on what point in the year, I think. But again, we just to keep it simple for folks, if it's a pack out area, keep packing out. Mycelium is not a substitute for packing out your waste. It's something that just helps improve the effectiveness of decomposition in places that we generally agree are okay to bury in.
Okay, I could read Ellie's question. Ellie is asking, until the new packed wag bags that are more sustainable, do the packed fungi cubes help in do-it-yourself do-it-yourself less plastic wag bags? For example, can the cubes break down poop even if poop is not on the ground?
I love this. Ellie is a good friend, Northern Arizona University graduate, and more of an expert on poop than I am. So I just have to laugh when I get this. Hi, Ellie. I'm so happy you're here. Um, Packed tabs need the soil environment to do their job. So they need exposure to the moisture and the warmth there, as well as the other microorganisms that are in the soil to kind of work. And so we haven't done a lot of studies about putting them in an enclosed environment. in terms of how their efficacy is, but it would be decreased significantly. It also grows a lot more effectively when it has exposure to oxygen. So when you tie up a bag and knot it, for example, like if you have your DIY wag bag, depriving it of oxygen is really going to slow down its growth rate. Another just sort of anecdotal point there, you may have seen this in the news. There's a lot of fungi eating plastic that gets talked about as a solution to our plastic waste issue. And so we have done testing with different species of mycelium that could break down the wag bag from the inside out. So you would have like a powdered mycelium spore inside of it. There's a number of little challenges with that I won't get into, but it's something that we're kind of looking at as a way to support faster decomposition of wag bags.
Okay, and then we have a question from Nicole. Just
Yeah.
out of curiosity, how did you all go about selecting the species of fungus for the mycelium tabs? I'm wondering about the unintentional introduction of a fungal species that wasn't present prior to use.
Absolutely. And this is like the question when it comes to our burial solutions and our approach. And we've spent a lot of years working on this. So when we started out, we worked with a private partner called Mushroom Mountain, whom we still have a really close relationship, and they work really closely with Clemson. They're some of the leaders in the mycoremediation realm using fungi to decontaminate soil. And they helped us build out an initial sort of set of potentially viable species that could be used. And then we did a number of lab studies with them and then field tests later on. Our species, and I'll go ahead and just share it here. We don't broadcast it on the website because we do have people that are, kind of trying to kind of copy our work a little bit. But we use Stropharia rugosa annulata, also known as King Stropharia, or the common name is wine cap. And so, a couple sort of characteristics about this species that give us confidence that we're not introducing something harmful. The first is the European Union has a classification of potentially invasive and harmful species, and they rate them on class 1 through 5. King Stropharia receives the lowest classification possible. On that scale, it is a 1. It has been introduced in continents around the world as a subsistence food source, so it is widely farmed for its fruiting body, in this case, the mushroom. It's used as a soil additive in agricultural practices as an alternative to synthetic or chemical additives in agriculture. So it's being used really widely in a number of different applications, and there has also been introduced in a number of countries and regions with no evidence of aggressive or invasive behavior. The other thing that I'll say about its characteristics is it falls into this class of fungi known as saprotrophic. So it's never feeding on living organisms. It is only feeding on dead and decaying matter, and then it is converting that matter into bioavailable nutrients in the soil. And so it has this very reciprocal relationship with plants and with the soil ecosystem around it. Thank you. Really, really, really important question, and happy to provide more data on that if you want to reach out and talk about it further.
All right, Eric is asking, did I understand correctly that a fungi product for privies, composters, vaults is under development?
Yeah, this is our ultimate pie in the sky kind of goal. And so we're starting and have a product for like vehicle toilets and in-home compost toilets. So that sort of scale. But what we're going to be looking for in the coming years is land management partners and academic partners to kind of research and pilot designs that take that to sort of the next scale. And it would really fit a little more, I think, with the model of backcountry privies, where that waste is a lot of times being packed out after use, and whether we could design a storage container that can simply be covered up when it's done because it's just loamy soil in the end, and that mycelium helps to like really reduce the maintenance efforts that are required by traditional composting toilets require a lot of turning and mixing and additives and all this different stuff that's just very labor intensive. But yes, that's what we're working on. That's great, Eric. Would love to talk further. I'll copy your email down here. Great questions, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really great questions. Well, if other questions pop up right now, we're happy to address those. And we've got, like I said, an extra 15 minutes. Oh, looks like Lamoni has a question here. Are you only considering partnerships in Colorado? Have you done any work with land managers in Arizona?
Yeah, we would love to explore partnerships outside of the state of Colorado. We're here, so there's a convenience factor, but getting into different environments and context is really important for expanding a lot of this work. So yeah, would love to talk further about that.
All right. Well, I'm going to share some information here in the chat and um, maybe close this out. But if folks want to stay on a little longer and ask questions while we have Jake here, feel free after I'm done. So thanks so much, Jake. And thank you all for joining us today. As I mentioned at the beginning of the hour, this webinar has been recorded. The recording will be posted to NWSA's YouTube channel soon, and links to the recording will be sent to all registrants via email and available on NWSA's website. Please feel welcome to share the link in your circles. Before you go, NWSA has a full lineup of webinars coming up each month throughout the summer. Next month on June 10th, we will open this space for a community conversation to share questions, challenges, and creative solutions amidst anticipated cuts to federal funding and the land management workforce. This is a little bit different from what we usually do, but we think this is an important time for our community to connect and share with each other. You can stay up to date on future webinars by subscribing to our newsletter and YouTube channel, and you can find more information on upcoming and past webinars on our website. All of these links are in the chat. And then finally, NWSA enjoys offering these webinars for free to our entire audience. If you or your organization are a current member, thank you. You support this resource. If you are not yet a member or contributor and appreciate this content, we'd love to have you join us. You can find a link to donate and become a member, and all of that information is also in the chat. I do see that we have quite a few questions coming up here in the chat. So Jake, if you're okay staying on a little bit longer, maybe we could just address those and
No
does
problem
that
at all.
sound good?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. No problem at
I
all.
wasn't really tracking where they started because I was busy talking, but let's see what we've got.
Yeah, it's Chris asked about connecting with some of our Forest Service partners. We work really closely with the White River National Forest here, as well as San Isabel, where we did this study, and a number of others. But happy to kind of put you in touch. Some of them have been implementing some of these strategies for a while now, both with and without our products. And so, yeah, happy to make those connections. Yeah, it sounds like David Johnston is from West Virginia. My family hails from there, so would love to talk to you, David. That's great. Um, yeah, thanks so much, guys. Okay, Chris, I got your email here. I will plan on reaching out. Ellie, you had one more question. Do you have a new direct way to engage land managers based on how much more this info may need? So this is a great question, Ellie. And Joelle and I were kind of talking about it actually before things got started and potentially presenting at the every other year workshop that they have coming up in 2026, but very open and interested in forums that individuals on this call may know about to share this information more widely. Also, like Penn State's still working on the manuscript for the Clean 14 study. And so that's something that there's going to be a lot more data coming out about this. And so part of it is kind of waiting until we have sort of that finalized analysis and peer-reviewed paper. But ultimately excited to be able to do this with anyone that's interested in talking about it or hearing about it.
Awesome. I think that's about it. Those are mostly questions or just comments for you. And I'm happy to share all that contact information with you, Jake, after we're done. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I just want to say thanks, everyone. Thank you, Jake, for the awesome presentation and so much information that I think we can all benefit from, and for your amazing product. I'm excited to see where you go with that. And thanks, everybody, for joining us and for sharing also some amazing questions. And I hope you join us again next month or for future webinars, and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Joelle, too.
Thanks, Allie.
Bye.